Okay, Mercedes W163 ML320, and today we're going to replace the front torsion bar, which is the spring in the front suspension. There's a little plastic cup that the torsion bar rests in, and this thing gets cracked over time and wears out. And anyway, I got these from the dealership. There's this, and when you replace it, you might as well replace this little metal end piece. It's aluminum, and it sits between the frame and the torsion bar support, the main support. You'll see it when we're putting it on. This is about $3, and this is about $13. There's the part number for the support bearing. And we're going to be replacing these. This is about a 15-minute job. And if this is bad on your car, it's going to cause the front end to sag a little bit. It's going to cause clunking underneath the driver's or passenger seat, a clunking when you hit bumps. And basically just the end of the torsion bar sits in this little cup, and the bar rotates back and forth within this, and it's like a little bushing, and it wears out and cracks over time. Mine are 15 years old, and it's about time to replace them. And again, it's about 15 minutes, give yourself half an hour per side, and like $30 per side, $20, 30, no, not even $20 per side for the parts. So it's well worth doing, and you're going to notice a difference in the ride when it's done. Anyway, I'm going to get all this stuff ready, and we'll be back in a minute. Now, the only other things you're going to need to replace this are an 18mm socket. A wrench will not work. You have to have a socket. It doesn't even have to be deep. It can be a shallow socket. It can be 1/2 inch or 3/8. Actually, you could probably even use a 1/4 inch drive. And I'm using, can you see that? I'm using a chopstick, but you need something skinny like this. Barbecue skewer will work, and I've marked it in increments of between 25 and 45 millimeters, and this is for adjusting. You're going to need this to kind of gauge the adjustment of the torsion bars on each side, because you want them to match up, and you will not be able to match them up any other way. There's no other way to actually measure it. So there's a little hole that you'll be sticking this in and matching the mark up with. And I've put it from 25, which is going to be very firm on your front suspension, to 45, which is going to be a lot softer. But the front shocks on these cars are very, very short travel. I'm going to show you the front. These are the ones I took off a week and a half ago, so you'll see the travel with the little bump stop in there. You've got about 2 inches of travel on the front suspension. That's it. That's all there is. So once the cap is on and everything's on, the bump stop sits there, and that's the travel you have on your front suspension. That's it. You can see these shocks were dead. So lowering your car, I know people want to lower them a little bit. You're going to run out of suspension travel, and you'd probably want to, if you do lower it, take that little snowman, the little bump stop in there. If you're going to lower it, cut one of the levels off that little bump stop so you get at least some suspension travel. If you're raising it, no big deal, but you will hit when the shock expands and goes all the way up. Not when it presses down, but when it goes up, you're going to keep slamming the shock all the way up, which is also not a great idea. But anyway, whatever you do with your suspension is up to you. I'm just saying that when we're adjusting it between soft and firm, you're going to need these little marks. So anyway, I'm going to get set up, jacked up at the front of the car, and be back in a few minutes. Oh, you're also going to need some grease. And I would recommend hosing everything down the day before to make sure everything moves, and just hose it down with a little bit of penetrant like WD-40, fluid film, anything like that, so that the bolt moves nice and freely. Anyway, I'm going to set up and be back in a minute. Okay, so front wheel on the end I'm working on is off, on the side I'm working on is off the ground to relieve all the pressure on the torsion bar. And if we go underneath and take a look, right beside the catalytic converter, there's the torsion bar. It goes from the front. You can see the bar right basically in front of the jack stand. It's a little bit rusty. This is Canada, everything's rusty. And it follows back to this thing, which is the spring plate that we're going to be taking out the little bushings in here. And this bolt right here, which is an 18 mil, is the only thing holding anything in. And of course my phone's ringing. Back in a second. Okay, apologize for the interruption. Let me see if I can back this camera up a little bit. So right here where this metal plate touches the frame, that's where that little metal, that little rectangular piece goes. And this bolt here, see this hole? That hole there is where we're going to measure from. Let me grab the stick. Now the factory measurement is going to be around 35 millimeters. And all you do is stick the stick in and check the measurement. When it bottoms out, check the measurement against where it's flush there. I've loosened this a little tiny bit just to make sure that the penetrating oil got through and that the bolt was turning fine. So 35 is going to be the base, which would be right there. And then softer is going to be 40 or 45, and firmer is going to be 25 or 30. And it's only a few millimeters difference, but it does make quite a difference in ride height. So I'm not going to, this is a very long bolt, so I'm not going to sit all day cranking it out with a regular socket. As I said, it's a long bolt. Oops. And there's our bolt. All muddy and greasy. And probably roasting hot. I'm probably burning my fingers. Thank God I can't feel it. So there's the bolt. Now I'm probably going to need a hammer. Hold on. There we go. Now there's a little plate in there that will pop out. That's no big deal. It's just held in there by the weight of the torsion bar on it. And because of all the rust and crap that's going to be there, you're going to have to wiggle this around a little bit until you can finally slide it out. Move the camera so I can... Come on. I have no idea how much more difficult it is to work around a camera so you don't knock it over. Come on, slide out. This does just slide out, by the way. There we go. Okay. That's the metal plate. Let me grab that. That metal plate just slips in there and is held there. When you put it back on, there's a little, see a little hole in the back of it? That hole slots into the torsion bar housing. And there's the little sucker we're going to replace. So you're going to have to tap this out with a hammer. It's probably going to be stuck in there. Clean everything out, and we will be back in a minute. Once I've done that, I'm going to clean all this up too, get all the goo and grunge off of there, and clean this up, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, cleaned up and put a little bit of rust-proof paint on the torsion bar retainer, or the torsion bar adjuster. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It's going to live under my Canadian winter car and get all crappy really quick. And on this end, this is the end that was toward the outside of the car. That's the end toward the inside with a little cup in it. Again, I chiseled out the old, well, just hammered out the old bushing. There it is. See the crack in the middle? Wasn't that bad. I've seen a lot of them much worse. Anyway, the new one will just pop into there. You can see there's a little bit of sealant from the factory. I think that kept it from rattling. It's like an anti-rattle thingy, so I'm going to put a little bit of sealant in there with mine. And this is the end cap where this little piece goes on top of. I pried this one off, but it was pure rust. There wasn't even anything to show you. And since the paint's on there, it's going to probably just allow that to sit. I don't need to seal that on with anything. It just sits on the frame and keeps this just is squished between the frame. It's not going anywhere. It doesn't need to be sealed. You can put sealant on there if you want to. You don't have to. I'm going to put a couple of drops of sealant. Not much, because the original is still sitting there, and that's going to kind of act as an anti-rattle. But I'm going to put a couple of drops of sealant goop in there. It's like a automotive goop. Again, this is not necessary. I'm just doing it to make sure there's no rattles. I'm going to take the new one and pop it in there. Okay, and two more things to do. I've taken my bolt, cleaned it up, and put Permatex copper grease on it so it won't get stuck. Underneath here, there's one more thing to show you. I've cleaned that all up a little bit, but straight up, see the bolt hole? It's kind of almost impossible to show you, but above that bolt hole, if you reach above the mount here, reach up underneath, you'll feel there's a rubber boot that when the bolt goes through there and threads in, it threads into this rubber boot sock type of thing. So in that bolt hole that you can see up there, just inject a little bit of grease in there to keep that bolt nice and unseized. So if you ever have to pull it out again, it's not going to be covered in rust. So I'm going to inject a little bit of grease in there just with a grease gun, and we'll be ready to put her back together back in a sec. Okay, if you can see the grease in there, the pink grease up inside that bolt hole. And let's get this camera in frame, hopefully. I've also put grease in the spring cup. And now, where's my plate? Little backing plate. So first you're going to push up on the bar and slide this in very simply. Oh, leaf, where'd you come from? Oh, I set it down near a planter, and I guess the paint just adhered to it. So you're going to take the spring thing, you see with the little lip on it, that goes toward you. So if I can reach around the camera. There, and that little finger goes through the hole in the slot. We're almost done. Take the bolt and we're going to feed it up into the hole. I'm going to try and do this by feel because I don't want to move the camera. Okay, that's going in. Okay. So now you're essentially just going to wind it in and keep measuring through the hole. Okay, so I'm going to wind it in and then start measuring, and I want to be at around 35 millimeters. As you can see how far we have to go. Like this would be a really soft setting here where it's barely up in there, but yeah, I don't recommend going that low. Bolt didn't feel like it was going in properly. And I just wanted to get all the copper grease all over the threads on the bolt up in top of there. I wanted to make sure it wasn't binding up, and it's not. And I'm going to put a little bit more copper grease on this to make sure it goes through there good. Just on the first few threads, so that when it starts up in there, it goes in nice and easy. Oh, all right, that bolt just touched my wrist, and it's awful hot from the friction. So I shouldn't be touching it. Okay. So I'm going to keep winding it in until I get to 35 millimeters. I know that my first one's 25, so I want it on the third one. It's way in there. Actually, I'm going to try 40 millimeters. Is what I'm going to do, just to see if I can soften up the front end the tiniest little bit. Why is this plate not matching up? That plate is not touching the body. Okay, it will once the whole thing goes down, once it's lowered back on the wheels. Where am I? Almost at 40. So at 25, 30, 35, 40. So I want to be at 40. A couple more. It's almost dead on. One more half a turn or so. And we're at 40, as you can see on the little stick marker. And I'm going to match up the other side to exactly 40, exactly the same side, and we're done. That's all there is to it. Thanks for watching. Before I turn off the camera, like I said, if you want a little softer on the front end, you can adjust it to 40 like I've done. 35 was where it was stock. When I pulled it out, I measured it, it was 35. I put new shocks in last week, and the front end got a little bit stiff. Not a ton, but a little bit stiff. It's firm, it's fine. But just to make it a little bit softer, we've got some crappy roads around here. I'm going to try it at 40, just a tiny bit softer, and we'll see how that is. And you can come in here at any time and crank this up and down, even with the car on the wheels, all the way on the ground. You can adjust this up and down a little bit. It's not a big deal. Just to pull it out, you have to have the front wheel off. But to adjust it later on, I mean, you can basically just lay down on your back and adjust this with an 18 mil, and you're good to go, and just take your measurement through the hole. Anyway, thanks for watching. Oh, quick addendum regarding the side plate. I thought it was going to pop back in when the weight went back on the wheels. I hadn't pulled it out far enough for the little, see there's a little slot there? Oops, where are we? There's a little slot that this little knob goes into, and I hadn't pulled it out far enough. It was in a little bit like that and keeping it from going in. So now that it's out, I'm going to readjust it and put the bolt back in and readjust it, and just make sure yours goes in flush there. Thanks for watching.